Hey everyone, welcome to day 4 of Crypto Sports Week. We're really excited to have you here for what is effectively another building block of what you need to be thinking about as you enter this space. I'm Jasmine Maietta, founder of Round 21 and co-creator along with Lady Pheonix, who will be joining us shortly, of Crypto Sports Week. And we're joined by Carlos as well, who's going to introduce himself here in a moment. But I just want to orient everybody around what this particular session is about in the context of what we've been sharing up until this point. So I'm going to share my screen for those of you who may be joining us more ad hoc, just to establish what this week is designed to do from an education and inspiration perspective. And then we'll quickly get into the content for today. So Crypto Sports Week was designed to bring the sports and crypto industries into formation, as this is a new burgeoning industry, landscape, economy. And Lady Pheonix, who has a tremendous pedigree through the lens of digital art, me as founder of Round 21, Greg, founder of Expo Boulevard, and Dylan, founder of Non-Company, collaborated to bring Crypto Sports Week together for you virtually from the comfort of your home, but with an incredible all-star lineup and speaker, including people like Carlos, which is incredible. What we've done every morning is we've basically broken down the fundamentals, not unlike joining a team or sorry about that. Sorry for the tech difficulties. I think there's some feedback going. Is that something you can? Awesome. Okay, heading back to the screen. So what we wanted to do was break down the fundamentals so that people who are learning with us had an understanding of the basic building blocks before getting into today's session around smart contracts. Day 1 was around the NFT ecosystem and some transferable knowledge through case studies of how the sports world has dove way, way deep into the deep end in some instances around this space. Second was very fundamentally setting up your wallet, which if you want to do any sort of commercial business, consume or sell NFTs or other products on blockchain, you're going to need to have a wallet. And then yesterday we spent time, Lady Pheonix really broke down all the considerations if you are planning to leverage an NFT platform, what you need to be thinking about. And then today, again, joined, with Carlos here, we're going deep around smart contracts. And so Carlos, before we get into it, do you mind introducing yourself?
I think he's on mute.
Oh, Dylan, can you help out with sound?
Carlos, so you're not muted. The host muted you. Is that what you're saying? Okay, we're going to get it fixed.
Awesome. Lady Pheonix, thank you so much for joining. I know you've had quite a busy morning. Do you mind establishing while Carlos is getting set up,
Sure.
What is a smart contract for people who maybe have never really heard of this and are used to more fundamentally things called sales contracts?
Sure, definitely. And then, Carlos, really quickly, just try on your end, on your computer. It may have sometimes it automatically mutes if you're using one of the streaming platforms. So you may want to just mute and unmute. And then possibly you can mute on the video end and then dial in on your phone and use your phone's microphone. So you can experiment. I'm going to give folks a little bit of background. I want to talk about also too really quickly who Monograph is. And I can put their website in the chat too. It's monograph.com. So just bringing that up as well, and I'll throw that into the chat right here. So yeah, smart contract is essentially, it's not a legal contract, and although in some instances it is a legal contract, but essentially a smart contract are instructions. It's software. It's instructions on what to do with the asset, right? So in this case, it's the NFT. So it's instructions for your NFT, what to do. If you like to see a good example of kind of how an elevated sense of how a smart contract can function in relation to an NFT, look up Mad Dog Jones. I think it was called Replicator. I kept wanting to say Resurrector. And I'm like, that's not the name of his work. It's Mad Dog Jones' Replicator. What's really cool about that smart contract is it not only is given instruction on how to collect, but it's also given meaning that if you collect the first one, if you collect the first NFT, then like 2 or 3 other NFTs from collecting that first one can be born, right? And I believe he has it written in the smart contract that whoever collects the first one gets rights on all of them, which is pretty crazy. So think of the smart contract as a set of instructions for the NFT, and also then set of instructions for your primary and secondary market. So if that NFT sells on the primary market, meaning selling the first time, and it sells again or flips on the secondary market, meaning it changes hands for a second time, then the smart contract will also include instructions on what to do for the exchange of that work, person to person to person. And so oftentimes on the secondary market, the instructions to the smart contract will be pay artists 10% royalty, 10% of the sale will be your royalty. So that's also in the smart contract. And that's usually in perpetuity of the work. So those are the kind of like basics of what a smart contract is and what it does. Think of it as a set of instructions. Again, smart contracts are typically software, right? Instructions, software, and text. They aren't necessarily legal contracts. What I love about Monograph specifically is that they've come up with a way. They have 7 patents around it. It's a legal wrapper around the software text, and I love that very much. So essentially, smart contracts are also sort of executed on their own, like they're self-executing once they're written and they press go or send. You don't need to do anything else. It operates on its own via the instructions given in the code. And so,
Okay.
yeah, and it's just an instruction between the buyer and the seller.
So going back to yesterday's primer where you broke down the NFT platforms and you talked a lot about Zora or OpenSea, et cetera. Once we do our homework and go to Mad Dog Jones, one example, but a good one,
Mm-hmm.
how does the smart contract get drafted in the situation you're describing if working
Mm-hmm.
directly with an NFT platform?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the people who draft up smart contracts are generally engineers. They work in a particular language called Solidity. And so if you want to understand smart contracts and you want to kind of understand the foundations, the code behind it, right? The sort of instructions for the artwork, meaning the NFT, and the relationship between the buyer and seller. You want to understand what Solidity is and how to write a contract in Solidity. That way you're familiar with how it can perform. There are, companies such as Carlos and Kevin at Monograph that understand that pretty well and have figured all that out for you. So you can, as a service, get someone to write the smart contract for you. But again, sovereignty and legacy being the 2 kind of tenets by which I run my business and my personal life, you want to go in and make sure that you understand the basics. You don't have to become a smart contract engineer, Solidity engineer, but just go in and take a class on Udemy for like, I don't know, $10, $20. Let me look right now to see if that's even being offered.
And what was that word you said before, $10 to $20? Take a class on?
Solidity. So I'll find that for you too right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to get the site for you.
Awesome.
Yep, Smart Contracts Online. Start learning at Udemy. UDEMY, and Solidity is SOL, like solid, and then ITY. So SOLIDITY. It's a programming language for smart contracts. It'll help you understand sort of the basic agreements between buyer and seller and instructions around assets that are committed to the blockchain. This one right here, I'm seeing a class for $14.99. Again, you don't have to even love the instructor, okay? Let's be really, really clear on why you're taking the class, right? You're taking the class essentially to get the foundations and understand the language that these contracts are written in, understand sort of like the stipulations, And then you're doing it so that you can have an intelligent and well-informed conversation, right? Either with platform devs, if you hire someone else in your own, as a developer or engineer, you want to understand how to speak to them and what can and cannot go in that contract.
Yeah.
So I'll put
And
a
you're
link there for
honest.
you guys to check out.
Thank you. And to have credible conversations with the art community, because they are asking a lot of questions. And when you, as a brand, I'm just more speaking to the audience, there's a lot of expectations that you are taking the steps that we're talking about here to make sure that that long-term and longevity of potential passive revenue is built into the contracts you're building with the people you work with. That's great. Thank you. Carlos, sound check.
1, 2, 3.
Hey, he's on his phone now. Thanks, Carlos. Sorry about the confusion earlier. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
No, it was all on my end. I apologize, and thank you for having me this morning. So I'm Carlos Mendez from Monograph. We focus on not only writing smart contracts on behalf of creators and artists and brands as well, but we focus on a particular aspect, which is in the protection of rights, copyrights, expressing use rights, whether they're, how to implement or use the media, or if they have claim on certain parts of the future revenue stream, either through secondary royalty rights or in ongoing rights, like you would see, for instance, in music, things like that. Our company has been around since 2015. One of our co-founders is the founder of NFTs. So he made the very first one. And right away, our focus was, how do we embed ownership, provenance, and rights on the blockchain such that those folks contributing intellectual property can protect themselves, and really importantly, those who then purchase, buy, rent, lease, whatever it may be, those assets feel that they too now have ownership when they purchase those tokens. And so we work very closely with Lady Phe and her team and her clients in order to ensure that in terms of encapsulating those rights and in this space, when you're dealing with athletes and celebrities and brand names, that has been a very big topic and a very big constraint for people to jump into the market, because they feel that if they don't explicitly express those rights, then they're potentially inadvertently giving them up. And so we help folks to ensure that they're protected and they feel that they can take advantage of this fantastic new medium, but do it in a way that's compliant with the last 200 years of US copyright law.
Carlos, can I ask just an establishing question before you get in, and you and Lady Pheonix maybe go into the details? So if a brand, let's say Round 21 is my startup, a brand in sports, or an organization like the Miami Heat, or an athlete who wants to work independently, when they think about how they want to connect with their fans or engage the community or create utility for fans in a different way through NFTs, the first thing we've been guiding them on is build a strategy around the narrative and value you want with your community. Then certainly think about the way you're going to creatively express this. Is then the next step around the smart contract, and or are some of those interwoven? If I'm just curious from the perspective of, if one of the, let's say an organization that it's a team wants to build a set of NFTs that provide a ton of utility and almost have micro engagement moment. I mean, are you thinking about smart contracts as part of the creative execution, or is it really once you know your creative execution, then you actually go to a full next step? I'm just curious when that step comes into play strategically.
It's a great question. And the reason I'm just trying to peer into your mind a little bit and how you're asking that question in terms of, is it sequentially? Is it, does one is a predecessor of the other or drive the other one? No, it very much is. Those things work in tandem. And that strategy and how you're going to implement that strategy on the blockchain, must work in tandem. Certainly, I would say a base, something that's a baseline is whatever it is that you're expressing on chain in terms of your media, make sure you have the rights. So I think that's a big we talk to many folks who we work with we work with a sports league today, and they have certain rights with their athletes in terms of imagery of them and use of their name and their likeness under certain situations, but not in others. And so we find that a lot of times, when the clients are tested in terms of what really do I own and what really can I, effectively post on the internet about third parties or associated parties or related parties. In this case, it's a league, a professional sports league. So I think that's the fundamental question. Then from there, it is about developing that strategy. So for instance, if you develop a strategy whereby it's not just NFTs, but it's a whole host of other content. This is not a client yet, but we're in the middle of a proposal with a professional soccer team in Europe, and they have a whole host of content that they want to post. And really what they're using is, instead of using an NFT strategy, they're using a token strategy where they're issuing a team token where fans can access these tokens and then use those tokens to view the content and effectively drive an ecosystem around those tokens. And so it's not even an NFT, it's just almost like a tokenized currency for the team and to provide really exclusive and valuable media to that fan base. So that's a slightly different use of the chain. So I would say, and Lady, I'd hand it to you, but you do many of these implementations and advise these types of clients, but I think they go hand in hand in terms of smart contract and strategy.
Yeah, I think that, as the NFT and the token space mature, right? I think we'll definitely see a lot more social tokens. So people will say, so right now people are just saying, "Hey, buy my shit," right? And that seems to be the big I'm enrolling you in my process, but it's like you're not actually enrolling me in your process. You're actually just saying, "Hey, buy my shit," and that isn't a way to build community. But social tokens are a way to build community, right? There's a gentleman in our community. He's called Amir, and he has a token called Heat. And with Heat, it's actually valuing the eye of the curator, right? So if you bring artwork forward to the community, that's really awesome, i.e. helping with discovery, then you as a curator get Heat token, right? So that's one way. Hold on. There's no information how an artist would use Monograph on their site. It's strictly a B2B play. Where do regular users take advantage of rights-enabled NFTs? That's a really good question.
Can we come back to that? Because I love to finish off the Heat. It's
Totally.
a great example for sports culture too.
Totally. Yeah, I
Awesome.
just got a little distracted by Dimitri. Thanks, Dimitri, for chiming in, by the way. Great question. So back to Heat. So there's a gentleman called Amir. He goes by Vane Spun, I believe, online. He has a few different aliases, but you can look up Heat Token and find him and find his work. He's also the creator of the Mint Fund on Twitter, so you can look that up. Yeah, essentially, so he's valuing the eye of the curator, which is really, really important because curators essentially drive culture, right? So he's essentially valuing those who drive culture. And with this token, if you post, tweet, make available new trends in culture, essentially around visual art and the art aesthetic in general, which does include sports, Jasmine, then you are rewarded this token, right? And so that's one way to think about the NFTs or the smart contract relationship. That smart contract will dictate over time how that token is both valued, right, by the community, but valued also within the market or by the blockchain, which is super interesting. And then the other side of that for the NFT space, right, if you've gotten beyond buy my shit, you start thinking about how the smart contract can perform. A lot of people don't see the smart contract as a type of performance art on its own as it relates to the NFT. I brought up earlier the example of Mad Dog Jones and Replicator because the smart contract, and for those who are nerds, you'll probably dig into the smart contract. You may find some discrepancies there, and maybe like what I'm saying a little bit and like how the contract is actually performing related to the work. And so if you find that, that's great. Reach out to Wilkins and Richard, two brilliant dudes, and Eric, I believe, three brilliant gentlemen that helped Mad Dog Jones work on that smart contract. This is the first time at bat, so there are some very interesting details there regarding the way the contract performs and the way the work is actually manifested. So, in saying that, what I love about Mad Dog Jones's work and why I'm using it as an example, Replicator in particular, sold at Phillips Auction, is because the consciousness around the smart contract being its own work of art that's in conversation with the actual visual art, the NFT itself, right? And so the conversation is that this contract stipulates the birth and death cycles of the NFT. I thought that was pretty neat, you know? And the smart contract, the way it's written and the consciousness through which it's being considered, actually performs in such a way that it elevates the artwork. We don't really see that so often in the space. I think a good example of where that happens as a regular part of the engagement is with async. We brought up async art yesterday when talking about platforms. Programmability is the future of the NFT space, specifically for visual art and sonic arts like music. And so, in particular, async, all of the works that drop on their platform are programmable. The smart contract is dictating what happens to the work in layers. It's very cool. It's very cool. Carlos, before we get into Dimitri's question, I was hoping that maybe you could speak about programmability and smart contracts as it relates to rights usage, but also rights ownership and protection of rights. And coupled with that, if you could speak to collaboration and how the smart contract and rights would be executed around a collaborative work, because collaboration is a large part of this space. It's everything, right? It's also the way people build community. So if you could speak to that, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Well, programmatic works are, really, they really open up the power of the smart contract and what's possible, and kind of the art of the possible. So, for instance, in a smart contract, you can deem to, if you look at the Mad Dog Jones work, and without even understanding, the actual code, you can just read the description, and you see that it does things like spawn new NFTs, and you can then have those NFTs autonomously be running programs that are looking at external variables, the size of the blockchain, the price of transactions on the blockchain, whatever, and then react to that and change in the future. And so, we and some of those are ones that you don't need to have any third party, what they call oracles, involved in it. Anybody providing external information, it can just run autonomously for effectively forever and ever. And so that framework offers a lot of flexibility. Whether it's a team that's creating a cool NFT that's going to change depending upon potentially the outcome of the season, of a player's stats, or it's, in Mad Dog Jones's perspective, it's more of a mathematical equation and what happens with that math. And in art form, and some of the artists that Lady Phe works with, changes to the actual artwork itself. How does it look, right? And so, I mean, the art of the possible is, it's infinite. It's what you can really conceive. And so, programmatic NFTs are almost a complete gamification of media going forward, and that's what's really, really exciting to me, because it's like programming games, programming cool things that live autonomously on the chain. And, people get really, really excited about that, building an avatar, building an NFT that's an avatar that's going to live a 300-year life. And it's going to be embedded in all sorts of games. And, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but those things are really happening today. And I think that, little bit of like, hey, it's a little JPEG and it's going out there and, it doesn't have any rights associated. That's where we started. But where we're going to end is going to be in this like really cool, cool world. And so that's the first part in terms of where I think programmatic aspects of NFTs is really going to show us a lot of implementations that are very unique and interesting, and importantly, I think lucrative. From the perspective of collaboration, this is really at the heart of the problem when it does come to. I know I keep pounding the table on rights, but when we're dealing with leagues, they actually have splits between the league, the player, the person who generated the art, the manager, the audience, the person who handles the audience, like the community manager, right? And all of those rights are baked into every single NFT, such that depending on the productivity of that asset, all of those people have to be compensated, and all of those rights have to be baked into the NFT. It has to be on the blockchain. It has to be observable by everyone, who in the world who would look at that NFT and say like, oh, there you go. So-and-so athlete is gonna, owns a 15% slug of this thing, and, so-and-so manager. So it's imperative that, that construct and that infrastructure be available to folks in order to implement those types of solutions, because that's the way the real world works. Like Lady Pheonix says, it's like collaborations. That is exactly the way the world works. And so, just like you would reflect it in paper in a contract, you need to be able to reflect that on chain. And so when we started building all of these solutions for it, that's what we mimicked when Lady Pheonix opened up the session. She talked about embedding legal agreements. Effectively, that's what we're doing, is embedding those legal agreements, but embedding them, onto the chain. And we've been very successful in building. We have we have global patents now on these types of implementations. And it's really like, we see it as a fundamental way to help businesses. The other question is, do we work with individuals or businesses? We work mostly with businesses, but they tend to be leagues, galleries, museums, auction houses, sports teams. And then by the very nature that we're working with them, we work with, their artists and their athletes and, all the individuals. So we do work with individuals all day, every day, but we work with them on behalf of, who they're associated to.
So I don't see Dimitri's question anymore, but I'm wondering if we could cover that question. Jasmine, do you still see that question there?
I do. And I think, Carlos, you were just scratching the surface of it with that last comment, but because he took the care to write it, I'll read it here. There is no information on how an artist would use Monograph on their site. Is it strictly a B2B play, which I think you covered, but he goes on, where do regular users take advantage of rights-enabled NFTs? So I think what's interesting about that is he capitalized. It sounds like that's a proper label for some. Maybe start there with what rights-enabled NFTs means, and then we can maybe see what you guys think for an answer.
Sure. So today we offer the ability to write rights-enabled NFTs, which means that you're encapsulating use rights, royalties, licensing, those types of components on chain in a smart contract embedded inside of NFTs, and we provide those to businesses and all of the associated creators, athletes, actors, that are associated to that. And so we have approached the market from that perspective, but we do hear loud and clear that just individuals would like to have that capability. So you should expect from us over the next, I was going to say couple of months, but no more than 2 months, I promise. We will be providing access to the broader community to be able to use that for their own purposes as individuals. So that's really important to us. And it's just a matter of doing it in the right way. So we're almost there. So just give us a little bit, and we'll extend use out to individuals.
Hey, Carlos, I love that you were giving the definition for rights-enabled NFTs, because I think that's even the understanding of that is sort of like new to the lexicon, right, of the space. because right now we don't have rights enabled NFTs really, right? We have NFTs that sort of um, attempt at providing rights through um, adding in the royalty. But that actually, in my mind, that's not truly rights. That's just the function of the agreement, right? And so what you all have done at Monograph, and that's monograph.com if you want to read more about sort of the basic functions of these rights-enabled NFTs. What you guys are doing is saying, and I love that you're actually going with the biggest players in the space, right? As you said, athletes and teams and celebrities and musicians. One might say, oh man, that's only reserved for the rich. But that's not necessarily true. It feels like you're going after the biggest players in the space who are creative, right, as well, so that the trickle down effect won't be such a trickle, but it'll be a waterfall, right? And by using these bigger like players in the space, you allow for the examples around protecting their rights to actually permeate all of society sort of at one time with one sort of like boom, right? And I love that. Would you go over one more time your definition? Because you're actually the one setting it, right? So this is the first time people are hearing this. The definition of a rights-enabled NFT.
Sure. So maybe before I go directly into definition, I'll just mention a little bit on the approach. The reason that we took this approach is these groups, these institutions, in terms of their understanding of their intellectual property is well baked. They have an army of lawyers. They are extremely concerned about how their intellectual property is being used. So our strategy has been, hey, if the Whitney Museum relies on Monograph, maybe you should too, right? And it's quite simple, about that simple. And we're doing it across different industries where the protection of understanding, like, the reflection of their copyright and the use of their media is extremely important to them. And also, it's not like we know everything, where we learn things as well. We learn from every industry has particular things that they're concerned about that have to be baked into these contracts. And so we work with them to do that. And as Lady Phe says, then we can open it up to everybody in those industries with really kind of the collective knowledge that we've gotten from them. Again, before I get into the definition, Lady Phe mentioned something, which was, hey, rights aren't really baked in. And I think that's a key, wait a minute, I bought a token. I own the NFT, I have the rights. Well, you don't. You have a reference to a piece of media, and it may be the piece of media that you're expecting, an MP4 file, a JPEG, a program, whatever it may be, but you would also need to have some type of understanding of what's the legal agreement to the use of that, almost like a license to use it, right? So if an artist goes ahead and let's say it's music is a good one, you NFT a piece of music, you reference it, but you by no means do they want you to then go and take that music and put it into a YouTube video. They don't want you to take that music and post it on a streaming site that's not an authorized streaming site that doesn't pay royalties for that. On and on and on. So those are some of the use aspects of it, which are not baked into NFTs and has led. There's a lot of articles around this issue around misuse of the media, and then you take it to the other side where you're like saying, well, I actually don't. I want to provide a right. I want to say, you know what, 20% of all of the income that I make from streaming this music, I actually want to allocate to whoever owns that NFT. Well, how do I do that? How do I legally do that? How do I associate that such that whoever bought that could say, yes, I own this token, and that means that legally I own, I own that stream. It's like, I live in an apartment in New York. I think I own the place, but not really. The title's with the bank, and so until I pay my mortgage, and so effectively that title is the title to the asset, and so that's really what we're addressing is those issues around ownership, rights, provenance, transfer, those ideas. So when you think about a rights-enabled NFT, it's quite simply the legal definition of those things, of what it is to own it, what can you do with the asset, and what are you entitled to have in terms of the utility of that asset from a legal perspective. And so that's the broadest term that I can think of when I think about a rights-enabled NFT.
Yeah,
I would love. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly, I wrote down earlier that you said in rights-enabled NFTs essentially encapsulate the use rights and royalties on chain for that artist. Would you say it's just like a broad definition, like in short, that's what
Yes.
it is?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I was going to ask, as again, a brand owner and partnering with artists, where does, if I was to drop a product on some of the NFT platforms we talked about yesterday, is there any conflict, reconciliation, prioritization of what sounds like what you just described is off chain, or is it actually embedded somehow in the NFT, the smart contract you just described, rights, and also like in the spirit of wanting to create rights-enabled NFTs, if relying on a third-party platform, how do you reconcile their contracts, sales and smart, and this like basically a product you just described as well?
Yeah, so this is just an aspect, kind of the situation that we're in. It's just a condition, it's a current condition of the market. And I'm not being critical of anyone or anything. It's just that the way that the access to many folks has been through these NFT marketplaces today. Those NFT marketplaces have particular use rights. In fact, some of them, if you read the use rights, say that any media that you do post, they have use of it. They have commercial use of it. I mean, many brands would be like, what? No, you can't use my media. So even before you even minted an NFT, you gave up rights for all of the media that you're putting on to create NFTs. Well, that's very, very problematic for our clients. So that's a no-go. They can't go on to any of those NFT marketplaces legally. Then you actually.
Wait, hold on, Carlos. I think you need to slow that one down.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people right now. They gotta fix their wig.
Me, including me.
Gotta fix their wig. Like what you said, just was like boop. Hat fell right off. Wig fell right to the floor. So can you say one more time? Just slow it down and say what you said about the platforms.
Sure. So one of my business partners. His mother one day opened up the New York Times and found herself as part of an advertisement for some cream product, her picture. And she was quite alarmed. And she hunted it down and finally figured out that it came from her Facebook page. And she complained. And Facebook said, well, when you accepted the terms of use for using Facebook, you said that we can use your images for commercial use. This was a couple years ago before they updated it. And she had no standing because she accepted those terms of use as being a member of that community. And so very similarly, when you go to marketplaces today, when you accept the terms of use of using that marketplace, and they're changing all the time. The rules are changing all the time. But certainly initially, one of them actually used the Facebook terms of use. Like they actually use the same language. And you're giving up as a default any media that you post on there for their own use, right? And so that is that obviously, just like my business partner's mother was very upset that she was in an ad in the New York Times, a brand would be very upset if by just trying to register their media onto one of these NFT platforms, they would lose that control. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, because then what is the implication that everyone who ever wants to mint anything on chain has to create their own marketplace from scratch?
Well, Well, there you go. So what happens is the next piece of it is if you go and you say, okay, well, great, I'm going to mint this NFT, and now I need to embed certain things that are very important to me as a brand, right? I will allow people, let's say I did want to allow people to use this asset, let's say it's a video for commercial use or to repost. Actually, I wanted to go on YouTube. I wanted to go on Instagram. I really want this stuff, but I don't want anybody to alter it. I don't want anybody to chop the video on the sides. I don't want anybody to color it. I don't want anything like that. And if you do that, you're outside of the bounds that I'm setting for the use of this media. There's no mechanism on, these marketplaces to reflect that and to do that, right? And so you need to then custom make your NFT to reflect those particular rights. And importantly, you need to do it in a way, and Lady Phe and I go back and forth on this a lot, you need to do it in a way that still adheres to the standards of NFTs, which is today's in particular, you'll hear a term, which is the ERC, which is nothing more than an Ethereum contract 721. It's just a particular standard. There's other ones, 1155s and other contracts, but that's a really popular one that's supported by all these marketplaces. So what folks are doing is they're creating their NFTs in a custom way, such that it does embed all of those rights and protections, but yet whoever buys it, whoever ends up owning it, if they want to one day later go on to one of the marketplaces, it'll still be compliant, it'll be acceptable, it'll be tradable, it'll have what's called interoperability, right? And so that's what we're seeing, today. We are introducing auction services for self-auctioning. So you won't have to rely on a marketplace. You can literally run an NFT sale off your own website. You're a sports league, you can run it off your sports league team. You're an athlete, you can run it off the athlete site, and you can run your own embedded auction. So you don't have to, Lady Phe is very much into sovereignty. You bake the NFT yourself, you put your rules and protections in it, you designed it in the way you needed it to, and then you ran the entire sale and left no rights, to be confused or given away by running the auction yourself. And so that's where we're headed, very, very quickly, because so many people want to get in the game. They want to NFT things, but these platforms have these challenges in them that are just difficult for folks with real intellectual property.
Yeah. It's this has been one of the most eye-opening. I'm just seeing some chats. I've also been getting texts from people. Very enlightening. I think we're coming up on it. We've been pretty good about keeping these about 45 minutes. Lady Pheonix, any maybe last question, or the blind spots? You get asked a lot of questions from a lot of industries before we wrap up.
Yeah, I do actually. Someone texted me or DM'd me and said, okay, I was tuning in yesterday. I'm hearing now that I don't necessarily need a platform, and that's like blowing my mind. And that if I'm on these platforms, maybe I'm signing my rights away, right? And so the question was, what about Nifty Gateway specifically? Because artists don't mint on their own contract, they mint on a Nifty Gateway contract. So what are the implications of that regarding use rights? And this is not just for Nifty, not picking on them. Again, great guys, but just the way they've set up their business, it does provide or invite a lot of scrutiny. Scrutiny.
Yeah. So I is that question for me, Lady Phe? Is that one?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
Let's just take Nifty Gateway off the. I'm not speaking about Nifty Gateway. I think that all of these marketplaces have done a tremendous good to the industry and brought a lot of attention to the industry and has benefited us all. But they just didn't approach it from a rights perspective. And so the answer is there are no rights embedded in these document. So there will always be some level of confusion as to what you own, what you're selling, and if there's any, one of the things that we do, we not only bake those rights, we also do tracking, misuse, enforcement of those rights. None of that will be possible, is at all possible on any of these marketplaces. So that's just where they are at today. Now, the other key piece that gets confused a bit is secondary rights. They say, well, we do get secondary sales rights, right?
Right.
Well, you do on those marketplaces. So it's as long as you're in that marketplace, you created it there, and whoever bought it comes back and sells it there, then yes, you can automatically get your secondary sale percentage, 10%, 15, 20, whatever it may be. But if they go ahead and sell it on Buy Finance, or they sell it on some other, other marketplace, that is not tracked. That's not, you can't automatically do that. And the reason is because that right is not on chain. It's not on the blockchain. It's just a recognition that you minted this on their marketplace. So it's all that information lies at the marketplace. It doesn't lie on the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another key piece that we enforce is we bake those rights into the NFT at the blockchain level. So now, despite that, it's very hard to police that, right? When somebody does a transaction away from, just privately, you have no visibility to it. The idea is that they're still legally liable to pay you that amount to deliver the ether to your account, and you'll see from us very, very, very soon. You'll know it happened.
That's right.
Know it happened. They didn't pay you. They owe you, and they have a legal liability to pay you. And
That's
so
right.
these are things that are now being implemented that allow people to have autonomy away from these marketplaces. Again, there's nothing wrong with them. They're great, lots of liquidity, fantastic, but it's just not the right place for the types of clients that we work with in terms of brands, teams, auction houses, so on and so forth.
It's not the right place for sovereignty, complete sovereignty, essentially. And again, yeah, thanks for diverting the attention. I would hate to get a bunch of DMs about, oh, you're just poo-pooing you're picking on one platform versus the other. No, I'm picking on the person, or not picking on. I'm making an example of the person who is the giant in the space because they have the most to gain by correcting some of their current practices, and it will benefit the whole, right? So that's why you often may hear me pointing out one or two of the same platforms because they are the big brothers in this case, right? They are the people with all the chips. And so if they correct their course of action, all the boats will rise with their tide. And so that's why you often hear me saying, the same platforms over and over again because they're the big dogs, right? They're the big dogs. And, like a big dog, if you do a cannonball into the pool, that splash is like, boom. So yeah, I want all the boats to rise. Mike says,
Oh,
yeah, I was just going to read the last question here and then we'll close because it's a couple minutes to 9.
Mm-hmm.
But Jasmine, did you want to interject really quickly?
No, I was just going to make your point. Lady Pheonix, is actually the point of the blockchain is the decentralization. It is the control, but because we're so used to conforming in these curated marketplaces, it's almost like shifted the dynamic back. And that, what the point I'm taking is be curious, stay questioning so that you don't default. So that was what I was going to
No, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Jasmine. Mike says, what if the NFT comes back on the original marketplace after 3 or 4 sales on other platforms?
So we would only recognize the last sale on that marketplace.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That is a tricky and very good question, Mike, but what Monograph has done with the legal wrapper, right, the legal language being embedded or baked into the NFT and the smart contract, it doesn't matter what marketplace. Have I understood that correctly, Carlos? They can go from super rare to OpenSea. See, here's the thing. It coming back to the original marketplace, it's a little bit weird, right? It can't necessarily, there's only a few places it can go. It can only really go from the original marketplace to OpenSea. It isn't like it can go from, if they purchase it on Nifty Gateway, it can't be sold on the secondary market on super rare, right? These guys are not interoperable like that. The only interoperable platform, sort of, right, in quotes, would be OpenSea. So you can buy from a primary market on Super Rare, Nifty Gateway Makers, all of these popular primary markets, curated markets, and you can sell it on OpenSea as a secondary market. But unless you bought it on that primary market, you can't really just keep going around and around and around and then end up back over there because, yeah, you've been in too many houses, I would imagine, right?
Yeah,
So,
the key distinction, Mike, that I'll make is that we think that interoperability between marketplaces will get much better. I think they can all benefit from that. Certainly on the secondary sale aspect that Lady Pheonix just points out. But if they're not interoperable and they're not communicating, then transactions that happen in one versus the other, they're blind to one another, right? So if you have a royalty right on one marketplace, it just will not be enforced on another marketplace. And so that's just a condition that we're in right now. In terms of Monograph, the only thing we can do from a technical perspective, so there's a legal piece. The legal piece is you will have legal recourse to any sales that ever happen with that asset if it's baked into the rights agreement of your NFT. But the second piece is enforceability, having it happen automatically. So that still requires a marketplace to do that on your behalf. And if they don't recognize that, they don't recognize your token, they won't do it automatically. So then the only other piece that we do is understanding that you're right, that right is baked into it. We can track the first part of the transaction, right? Even though it's happening in some other marketplace, we can track it on chain. We can say, wait a minute, that's a monograph. That's a monograph. We call them monographed. That's a monographed NFT. And it has a secondary rights agreement. And it just moved from this address to this address. We don't know how much, but it happened. Hey, creator, brand, sports team, you just had a secondary sale. Let's give them 30 days to pay. They didn't pay? Uh-oh. Okay, now let's send a message and hit the logs and say that this transaction, this thing has happened without a payment. And so that's what we mean about tracking and enforceability. And those are things that are, these are the same things that people do with music, that the CCC does for music in terms of of collections. And you'll see more and more of that happening here in this space, as we go forward. I promise it will get better. It will get better.
I think we have to cut it. I have there are a lot of chat bubbles bubbling up around, platforms like Zora, which are both an NFT marketplace, but more so a protocol. I think we have to cut it. We have one more primer tomorrow, you guys. Come back. That is about what to do to have a successful drop party. Maybe we just preamble it, Lady Pheonix, about Zora, just keep people coming back, to be continued. But this has been an incredible use of time and well worth the tech difficulties at the beginning. I mean, Carlos, thank you so much. Lady Pheonix, thank you so much. This was amazing. It was really great.
thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Jasmine.
Awesome.
See you
Team,
then.
last thing is at 1 p.m. today on Clubhouse, we have our NBA Lab Round 21 drop party that's happening with all this context on Bitski. It just dropped live. And this auction is for basically 27 hours, but that's the 1 o'clock Clubhouse. So we'll see you there. And until then, we'll see you tomorrow morning at the primer. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.